I experienced sexual abuse between ages 15 and 17. At first it was in my house, and then it was also in a car.
The first time I experienced sexual abuse, it was in the car outside of my great-grandma's house. And the second time was in my apartment.
The sexual assault happened when I was 5 at my aunt's house.
I believe I experienced it maybe 5 to 4 years old.
I was 5 years old, and it happened in the apartment I was living in.
I was 21 years old and I was in my dorm room.
Sexual assault is different for every person, but I think it hangs on consent. If you were in a situation where you felt like you couldn't provide consent or you did not give consent and something happened to you that you did not want to happen to you, I would classify that as sexual assault.
So when we define sexual assault, that is a sexual type of act that is committed by a perpetrator towards a victim without consent. And that can look a variety of different ways. It can be the perpetrator violating the victim, either vaginally, anally, orally. The perpetrator can force the victim to perform those acts on the perpetrator. So it may be that the perpetrator is forcing the victim to perform oral sex or anal sex or some other type of sex that the individual does not want to do. The consent portion is what is so important when we talk about sexual assault. And it's not just the penetration, it's also any touching, fondling, groping of any of the sexual organs, erogenous zones, any kind of touching of the body that is done without consent.
I was definitely always one of those people who knew that sexual assault, sexual abuse happened. I heard of stories, I saw stories, thought they were very sad, but I always imagined like that would never happen to me. I'm very resourceful. I'm not promiscuous. I wasn't even having sex at the time, I don't think. So I had all of these ideas that kind of made me feel better than that. Like, that would never happen to me. So when it did, it definitely shattered my world in so many ways.
Being sexually abused, I feel like was a layer to all my other emotions. My dad was killed by my brother when I was 15. So when I got sexually abused like a few years before then, I think it really impacted my relationships with my family, how I viewed sex in general. When it happened again when I was 20, I think it was a lot more confusing, but also reflective. It was confusing because I never imagined that I'd find myself in that situation again. And I felt like the reason why I got raped at first. And I was very unwilling to reach out to anybody about it. I didn't tell my mom until about 6 months after. I waited like a week and a half to tell my sister and my mentor. I just didn't want anybody to think that I was promiscuous because I felt like it was my fault.
So many sexual assault survivors talk about the fear that they're not going to be believed, or that they are going to, that people are going to somehow assume that they quote unquote deserved it. I tell you, this is what drives me insane. We don't blame people when they are robbed. We don't blame people when their house is broken into. We don't blame people when they're victims in any other situation except for sexual assault. So we really try to help that individual recognize that they did nothing wrong. They did not ask for this, and we believe what they said happened is what happened to them. That is so important for those individuals because they're already struggling with internal voices of doubt, but maybe inadvertently external voices of doubt.
When I was in high school, I'm trans, by the way. So this was pre me coming out, pre-transition, pre-everything. I had a girlfriend in high school, and she would force me into giving her sexual favors or like doing sexual things with me when we were hanging out that I didn't want to do.
Basically what happened, it happened quite frequently. I won't go into too much detail, but basically it was my stepbrother and he had come to live with us. And so what would happen is I had this little blanket, I named it Wubby. So he would cover my eyes with the blanket and, sexually assault me. It happened a lot of times. It finally stopped because my sister saw it happening. All three of us shared a room, and she saw it. And yeah, it was traumatic, to say the least. I remember having to go to the hospital to get checked out, and they took my favorite pajamas away. It was little Cars pajamas, but he did go to jail for it, so that made me feel a little bit better, I guess. Got the justice I kind of wanted, even though I didn't know really at 5 years old.
The first time it happened, it was with my cousin. I pushed it down for years. Not until the year that I got raped was I like, okay, I think I was sexually assaulted as a kid. Because I never viewed it as sexual assault. For me, I was just doing something bad with my cousin. Sex was bad, And we weren't having sex, but we were interacting sexually. And it also really embarrassed me. I'm like, isn't this incest? So for a really, really long time, I just shoved it down. And when I turned 20, the dude it happened with, I'd invited him over. I welcomed him into my space. The way it worked up to rape was very slow. At first, we were just hanging out. I thought we were friends. And then he was like, give me a chance. And I'm like, okay, I could give you a chance. I'd love to go on a date with you. That'd be nice. We started kissing. Then we took our clothes off, and I told him I didn't want to have sex. He was like, okay. And I'm like, okay, maybe we'll just do oral or something like that. And then it happened. And I was very confused at first. I didn't say no. I think that's why I felt like it was my fault. Ever since I'd gotten assaulted when I was a child, when I started interacting with men sexually, I never felt like I had a voice. I never asserted myself. I never told men what I liked, what I didn't like. The experience of sex was in order to please another. And I'd always wanted sex to be pleasurable for me. I think that's why I continue to interact within sex, hoping that I could get to this point where when I have sex with somebody, it'll feel open, it'll feel communicative, it'll feel intimate. But I'd always struggled with asserting myself. So in the moment, I didn't say anything. It finishes, it's over, and I tell him that I didn't want to have sex again. And he tells me that he didn't know, that he was sorry. And I was like, you should leave. And he left, and I destroyed all the evidence. I washed my sheets, took a shower. Not till a week later did I realize the reason why I couldn't let go of the feeling of being violated is because I was. And that's when I finally started reaching out for help.
I'm gonna get real raw. What happened is, it was multiple times, but the very first time, she wanted me to penetrate her. And I did not know anything, me as a young child, I didn't know what a erect penis was until then. Then she wanted me to enter her and everything, and I'm here crying, and she's like, do it. And I said, no. She slapped me a couple times to do it. She did it, I'm not sure how many numbers of times she did it, but that's how it usually happens. And this person was a very close person. Even to this, not to this day, but there was at one point that I couldn't really trust my best friends. Even, I couldn't give them full trust. Even it plagued my relationships with, being, in a relationship with a woman. I couldn't really trust that much. I couldn't. Only just survive just by myself. I was the youngest child. My two sisters are older than me. I couldn't really relate with them either.
The experience for me, I don't think I noticed it until I was 17, because that's when I first explained it to my parents. I had kept it in since I was 5. And I'm not sure if I recognized how it would have impacted my mom or not, but I kept it until I was 17. And I expressed it, and I'm not sure. It made me, I guess, hypersexual, if that's a term, but I didn't think of it as an effect yet, until I got older, and then I started to realize how hypersexual I was. And then when I did realize how it had affected me, I started going to therapy. That wasn't until college. It made me more, I would say that my response to men was more, I wanted to be in control. So I have this natural control mechanism thing that I do to where, like I said, I typically want to be in control of my situation. If I don't feel like I'm in control of my situation, I tend to back off. So it's this fight or flight response. I'm not a fawn person. Either I'm in control, or if I feel like I'm not, I immediately back away. So for men, I typically leave relationships if I don't feel like it's going the way that I need it to go, to where I feel safe. But since therapy, I would say I'm learning how to relax more. I was a person that people pleased, and I'm learning that I don't have to.
The night that it happened, I actually, the person who assaulted me, I saw them at a student organization event. I was always really big on campus. I was always around meeting new people, doing new things. So it wasn't uncommon for me to always have friends over, meet new people. And I think that's the college experience. So I had met this individual at an event. He was super nice, super sweet, very cool. And he told me that he wanted to hang out with me. He was like, I like your vibe. It never seemed anything sexual. It didn't seem anything other than friendship. He came over, we hung out, we watched TV, we talked, we chatted, we catched up, until there was a shift in body languages, a shift in mannerisms, a shift in the energy. It felt like the shift shattered my thoughts about what was gonna go on that night. He began to call me pretty, which I said, thank you. And then I'm a very awkward person, so I kind of just moved over a little bit and tried to act like that wasn't weird, because it kind of was. And then the compliments slowly turned into touching, and which I told him I did not want at all. The touching slowly turned to gripping. The gripping turned to him grabbing me. That turned into clothes flying off. And even me talking about this now, I can still feel his hands, the way he gripped me. I can still feel the sweat of him sweating so much because I was struggling and telling him no, that he built up a sweat, his sweat hitting me in the face. I can remember clawing at him, saying no, feeling super uncomfortable. almost to that breaking point of giving in, but I really felt like I had super strength that I finally pushed him off of me and was like, I really don't want to do this. Don't want to do this. So he's huffing and puffing because he was struggling. Long story short, I left. I was like, you need to leave. I feel very uncomfortable. He asked me to walk him down. I did. He asked me to give him a hug before he left. I did. After he left, he immediately texted me and said, I'm sorry. And I think in that moment, I knew that something had happened to me, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was sexual abuse. I didn't know it was sexual assault. I didn't know it was a rape. And honestly, for so long, I always was like, yeah, he just tried to get with me. I did not know that, I did not know that he penetrated me until after I got an STD test and I had chlamydia. So yeah, it impacted me in so many ways. After that, I was very anxious. That's when the root of my anxiety started. I am still very fearful to go in public places. It's gotten a lot better through therapy. This was right before I met my current now boyfriend of 2 years. So even our relationship, like, he was the first person I told. He was the first person that I felt comfortable with. And it's been something that we've had to navigate our entire relationship. Because when it happened, we had just kind of like became friends and we were talking and like, you know, all of that. So it's been a journey.
If you don't have sex with me, I'm going to out you to everyone, your parents, teachers, all your friends. I'm going to tell everyone. So from that point, I just had to go along with it and do as she told me to. So then she made me sneak out of my house in the middle of the night, and she drove her car to like just a spot in my neighborhood. And then she locked me inside her car and raped me. And she did this multiple times, like 4 or 5 times. And I just couldn't do anything about it because if I tried to tell anyone, that I'd have to out myself, which I just was not going to do at that point. So it was a double-edged sword. If I try to report this and tell anyone, then she wins essentially.
The first person I ran to was my mentor. Sorry. It was really hard at first. I'm sorry. The first person I ran to was my mentor. I was so embarrassed because, like I said, it felt like my fault the whole time. I felt like I'd welcome myself to that interaction. So when I told her I really didn't want to, I thought she would see me different. And she didn't. That's why I'm crying. These aren't sad tears. They're happy tears. She told me she had the same type of experience in college and how it impacted her. And it opened me up to tell my sister, to start telling other people. That's when I reached out to USF's victim advocacy. They were able to let me know the things that USF provides, what they offer, as well as what I could do legally with the situation. I was so upset because, like I said, I destroyed all the evidence not even an hour after he left. And a week later, I find out that the evidence has been destroyed. For a while, I deleted our text messages. I blocked him, all just to forget that the experience happened. So I never ended up pressing charges with him. But that's when I finally opened up. After telling my mentor, after reaching out to USF Victim Advocacy, because I just realized like I couldn't do things that I could normally do. I remember I went on a walk and I turned around maybe a block into the walk because I was filled with this sense that everybody knew that I'd just gotten raped and nobody cared.
How I saw myself when I was younger, not just only that I couldn't trust people, I couldn't trust my own actions as well. Like I procrastinated a lot of things. It was hard to, I was indecisive a lot of times in my life. Sometimes I get real serious about something, then next thing you know, I could drop it just like this. I really needed to know if some actual individual can actually love me. And that was difficult on its own as well. It was really difficult to even open up to an individual and be vulnerable to an individual. And you know, society says men cannot be vulnerable to people or anyone because it's a sign of weakness. But my biggest factor of healing was one of my close friends telling me they went through a situation similar to what I went through. And that started the healing process. If he never opened up and was vulnerable to me, I'll probably never open up to anyone. But it just, for him just being open, it relieved me to be open to people about my testimony.
Like for me, it's important to have somebody that understands boundaries. And I'm very bad at setting boundaries, but I think my body language says it more than words do. So just, she can tell when I'm uncomfortable with something. And that's, to me, very rare. My face also will speak before my words, so I guess that's also a thing. But just, you know, having space is important for me too. Just to like, if something makes me uncomfortable, just to have that space to like regroup internally and then continue on.
If I do have a son, I will teach him the power of no. If he's wanting to pursue a relationship, if that's a no, fine. Leave it at the door, walk out. We breaking that thing, which is something I was also raised on at the same time, because I grew up in the city. I grew up in the hood. So when we heard no, no means yes, right? So we trying to break that norm.
To bounce off of that, what I would say is before no is to listen. And I feel like that's the main thing men don't do. And like that's the first issue, is to sit and listen, and not listen for you, but to listen for her, listen for the other person. That way you'll hear the no. And when you hear the no, you'll have no. Okay, I know no means no. No's not yes, no's not oh. They're playing hard to get. No is no. And if you don't understand the no, because you listen, you'll be able to communicate and be like, did you mean that? Or in what sense? And I feel like that's a main, like, they don't listen to anyone else. And like men tend to, or if they do listen, they hear their own thing. Oh, that's not how you said it. Oh, no, but you're acting this way. It's like, you can't, those aren't excuses that should be used if you're actually paying attention to hear the other person, to perceive and understand what you're being told. A good boundary I put is just ask. Anything. Can I touch your hair? Can I touch you? Like, can I get by? Like, ask and just show that there's not a preset of you being a comfortability, because you go around, and I know personally in my life, a lot of women I know have been sexually assaulted, unfortunately, and it's not a story that's rare, or not a story that you hear once in a blue moon, like, and it's not good at all, because you see the guys walking around, and as a guy myself, you see it in the demeanor of the men, and some of the boundaries I set for myself, I just can't be around guys like that, and like, because I'm the one that's going to tell you, no, don't do that, like, don't, if she told you no, don't continue bothering her, don't show up to her door, and until guys break, I feel like, a certain point in their head to realize, like, women are people too, and they have feelings. It's not what we've been raised on or the misogyny that's being passed around. Like, to be a man is to be a leader who can listen to your partner, because I honestly feel, and it's true, that behind a great man is an even greater woman. And it's like, if you actually give the time and attention to understand them, you'll reach a point where you'll know, okay, certain stuff, you just have to set a boundary. Like, you have to be the one, like, if she's too drunk, like, leave her alone. If she can't consent, leave her alone. You'll know when to put yourself in a place, like, there's a better way to do this. There's a way I could step out of this situation and save so much of someone else's personal life and their trauma and their experience, because people are hurt when they go through these things, and like, it stays with them.
I think if you can think of it as something very simple. A lot of times we think about kids not having autonomy. Think about how often do you ask a child for their permission to do something. So I think if we started very early on just giving children the opportunity to say no, then we start a culture of consent, because a child has had the opportunity to say, no, I don't want to give that person a hug. You think about how many times you've been forced to give someone a hug. You're creating a culture where a student will, or a child or a person will say, well, maybe I should do that because that's what I've been taught. So I think for consent, it's all about having the autonomy to say yes or no, from something as small as a hug to something as very important as, I don't want to engage in sexual activity.
Well, we know here at the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay, and I said it just a moment ago, trauma untreated does not go away. And there is no bigger trauma than when you are a survivor, which is what we refer to individuals as. They're not victims, they're survivors. So for a survivor of sexual assault, they have had their power and control taken away from them by a perpetrator. And so what is so important in the process is to help that individual reestablish their own power and control. And when we talked about that sexual assault exam, one of the key tenets of that exam is reestablishing that power and control. So consent is asked at every stage of that examination process. Again, we want to remind that individual, you are in control and power of your own body. Whatever you want to have happen is what we will do together. And so I think that is so important, that we help the individual reestablish that consent or that power and control for themselves, as well as addressing the trauma of what happened. Because when a sexual assault occurs, if it is not treated, what science tells us is that the brain never forgets and the body doesn't forget. And so an individual can be going about their day and they can hear a sound, they can smell a scent, they can see a sight that will absolutely send them right back to that assault and render them almost powerless in that recollection process. So, when we talk about individuals who have been victims of any type of trauma, it's so important for them to be able to process that trauma. Unfortunately, we can't take away the experience that has happened, but good trauma therapy through a certified therapist can help you process that therapy so that you can talk about it without experiencing any adverse side effects.
I think it just depends, again, on the person and what they went through, the support that they have. So of all the stories that I've ever heard, the thing that made the largest difference was support. So when I told someone that this happened to me, they believed me. That changes how you interpret that entire situation. So it can go from, I told someone and they did something about it and I got the help that I needed, or I told someone they didn't do anything about it and I had to heal on my own. The psychological effects can be very different from person to person.
Personally, for me, I found more comfort in going to my family about it and having like those people that were close to me, kind of help me through it, even though they're not professionals and they haven't experienced it themselves. Like just having that comfort and that love from them really helped me push through it.
The first person I told was my boyfriend. I think he was my main resource, as he still is to this day. And he wasn't my boyfriend at the time, he was just a friend. He was like my lifeline throughout that entire process. Like that night he was able to stay with me because I was super scared of being alone. He actually was the person who told me to tell my parents. And I did tell my parents what happened, and they did take me to the police station, which is something that I literally said in my brain that I would never forgive them for. And the only reason why I have forgiven them for that wholeheartedly is because of therapy. Because sometimes I feel like it's better to do something that may not be 100% the best in the moment than to do nothing at all. My parents tried. They tried to take me to the resources. They took me to the police station. I got in front of the police person and I was like, nothing happened. I sat there. I said, nothing happened. I don't want to be here. I'm only here for my parents. They're forcing me to be here and I want to go home. So there were resources. I just did not want to accept them. The only thing I wanted to do was to curl up in a ball and cry. I also did go to victims advocacy, and I did talk to them maybe once, but then they told me to get tested, and I didn't want to do that. And I just didn't want to come to terms. I didn't want to figure anything out. I didn't want to do anything. The older I got and the more comfortable I got with saying, yes, I did get sexually assaulted, that's when I was open to therapy. That's when I was open to talking about it in a space like this. That's when I was open to really trying to dismantle things in conversations. Like, if you say something that's a little weird, I'd be like, no, that's weird. I don't like that. So now I'm more open to the resources, and there were a lot out there, but before I was like, no. It's I don't want to do any of it. I couldn't grasp the fact that I was kind of a victim in that moment. I didn't want to do any of that. I'm like, he's not worried about what he did to me. He's not worried about my feelings. I shouldn't worry about it. I buried it for almost a year or 2 years. And I'm just now kind of getting to the place and the point of healing.
I'm going to start off with this. I'm open to resources as in therapy and etc. But how I came about is Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. What happened is that just like he's my best friend, he's also saved too. And he was just being vulnerable, and of course that opened me up. And I developed a relationship with God, and he just put a mirror in front of my face of all the parts about me, especially unforgiveness. I held unforgiveness like I'm the world champ, I had a belt right here, and I always went right back to my negativity just like I was saying, just like a world championship belt, yeah, I went through this, and you see this scar? There's men that have this war scar. Yeah, I kind of was like that, right? You forgive these people, you'll stop holding on to things. And then when I started unforgiving, even though I've forgiven the individual that, touched me originally, it was a big weight off my shoulders.
I didn't talk about it for years. I didn't really say anything to anyone for a very long time after it happened. But I did talk to some of my very close friends about it, and they sort of were just kind of there to support me. And tell me that things would get better and kind of just keep me sane while I was figuring the rest of everything out. I ended up going to therapy around the time that I had started coming out and transitioning. So I was able to finally open up to a professional about that, and being able to go to a therapist who did specialize in sexual abuse and PTSD really helped, because they were able to use some more like psychological methods to parse through that and be able to understand what happened to me and how to get past it. So just talking about it in therapy, and just kind of learning to open up again and like learning to trust people again after all of that betrayal.
I'm typically a person that handles things on their own. So like I said, from 5 to 17, I held that in. I read books. That was like my outlet. I focused on school. I focused on dance. Those were my coping mechanisms. Until I got to college, that's when I was able to actually unpack everything. I would say that therapy helped a lot. I'm still learning. I'm still unlearning a lot of habits and survival techniques that I use to help myself when it comes to dealing with regular people. Therapy is very beneficial. It helps you actually hear the thoughts that are in your head. It helps you to be able to dissect what it is that you're thinking, to be able to help, have somebody validate what it is that you're thinking or debunk the negative things that you're thinking about yourself. Because for me, I felt like it was my fault. At 5, I felt like it was me, like I allowed it. My mom, she gave me the resources and the tools. She told me, if somebody ever touched you, let her know. But I felt like it was my fault. I allowed it to happen. It was a family member. And then when I didn't tell her, I felt like it was further my fault, because it was like, she told you to tell her and you didn't. So the times that it happened when I was in high school, to where like I didn't necessarily consent, but I just let it happen. It was like, well, Krisha, you let it happen, so how could it be sexual assault? How could it be real? Who would believe you? As I sit here now, it's more so like, wow, like I experienced that. Yeah, therapy definitely is a perfect resource and a tool, because it helps you to realize what you experienced, to take it in, to internalize it when you necessarily want to like push it away from you, or it helps you understand who you are, who you're not, what you can become. So definitely therapy. Talking to friends who have experienced similar things. Talking to people who haven't, because you realize how common it is, and how people who haven't experienced it, it's not common to them, so they don't necessarily know what it is that they need to say or to help prevent this type of thing.
I think one of the great questions you also had on this is, what does an individual need to look for in a therapist if they're struggling or if they have experienced trauma? I would say that that therapist needs to recognize what their skill sets are and what their areas of expertise are. Trauma therapy, I equate it, and this is just Clara's equation, to being a cardiologist. you have a specialty area that you have honed your skills and you have advanced training in. Not every therapist is trained in trauma. So I think for both the therapist as well as the patient, you need to understand exactly what is happening, what the issues are, and find the professional that's going to meet your needs. And even the therapist being willing to recognize when you are outside of your scope and know it's okay to refer to somebody else to treat the trauma, but then you can still come back to deal with maybe relationship issues, maybe deal with behavioral issues, marital issues, whatever else is going on can be dealt with once that trauma is addressed. If trauma is not addressed first, however, individuals are going to continue to experience these symptoms, for lack of a better word, because we're not addressing the underlying cause of why decisions are being made, why thoughts are in place, those kinds of things.
What I would say is, it's okay to be vulnerable. What the world is saying, portraying that this is that, it's that, it's that, move that out of the way. Get that wall out from your face. And when you move that wall, speak to someone that you trust and be vulnerable. Because when you're vulnerable, there's a breakthrough that's going to happen. Whatever it is. Presence helps out. Being a listening ear helps out. Especially a person that does not trust. Because a person that does not trust, we're big on actions. So if you're not listening to us, we can automatically cut that out. I don't think you're not listening, so I'm not vulnerable no more. So presence is a big deal.
I would say my advice is to trust yourself. If it's something you want to talk about it. If it's something you don't want to talk about it, don't talk about it. Like, never feel like you have to force yourself to fit into a mold of what a survivor looks like, because there isn't a mold for what a survivor looks like. So it's always about what you're comfortable with and what makes most sense in your healing journey.
For people who've survived sexual assault, a message that I'd like to give them is that it does get better. Like, yeah, it sucks for a long time, but it does get better. You just have to reach out for support, and reaching out for support is the hardest thing. It's not easy to let someone in on what happened to you and allow them to help you. But one thing that helped me in getting support is realizing that in therapy, everything is confidential. They can't tell anyone, they can't report anything. So you can feel safe to talk to a licensed therapist about that type of thing because it is confidential. And so that really helped me in, getting therapy, getting a therapist who is specialized in sexual abuse, PTSD, is a very helpful thing you can do.
For survivors, the message I want to convey is that your experiences don't have to be the end of it. I thought that because I perceived myself as promiscuous, or I perceived myself as entering into that situation for me, I put myself in that situation. I thought that I wasn't redeemable. I felt like it was my fault and I had to sit with the feeling, but your experience doesn't have to stop there. You can continue to learn more about yourself through your pain. It sounds really hard, because it is, but it's so rewarding. You get a different version of yourself once you open yourself up to the things that are vulnerable and painful. For allies, I would say stay accountable. Don't be a bystander to sexual abuse. A friend that sexually abuses other people, or you see sexual abuse, you say something, because sometimes people are like me. They think that they deserve that experience, or they think that they put themselves in that position. And really, that's not true. Everybody can do something about it.
To the person who is surviving, keep going. One thing I told myself at a young age, and I don't realize if I knew that I was helping my older self, was that don't be a product of your environment or what you've experienced. I realized at a young age that I didn't want to be a product of my experience or my environment, because that can either lead you to repeating the same patterns, or it could lead you to becoming an empty shell of yourself. And I never wanted to give my assaulters the power over me. That was my thing. I never wanted to give anybody who ever did something that remotely took away my innocence power over me, because when you give them power, it lessens who you are, it lessens who you become, it lessens everything that you could become, because perseverance is everything. Who you are, what you endure builds character, and either you can take the wrong path or you can take the right path. And I wanted to be a person who took the right path. I wanted to be a person who protected those who experienced that. I wanted to be a person who was able to shed light or provide an example of what you can become despite what you've went through. So persevere. And it's easier said than done, because I've had my fair share of mental blockages. It definitely makes you have this what is it when you imposter syndrome. It makes you have this imposter syndrome to where when there are things that you're good at, you start to reflect on the things that you've been through, to where you're like, I don't think I could possibly make it here, or I could possibly do this because of the things that I've been through. But God uses people. He uses everyone. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter where you came from. And you have to recognize that, and you have to realize that there are so many powerful people who have been through the trenches. And I would say that's a treacherous place to go through, to feel like, to deal with trusting somebody with your being, with yourself, and then they take advantage of that, because people are going to do that. So it's better to persevere versus let them having the power. When it comes to allies, I would say comfort, emotional support, and letting them know that they are stronger than what they've ever been through is very beneficial. Whenever I talk to people my friends per se, that I can trust, and they give me that reassurance, it's very powerful. It's very powerful.
The message I would like to give viewers who are allies or just want to be there to support someone that has gone through sexual assault is, people always think it's because of what someone's wearing or how they were acting, but I was 5 years old when it happened to me, so that's not the case. And I think it's really important just to stick through, with what you're saying. So if you're saying like, oh, I'm here to support you, like, commit to that and don't try and make jokes about it or anything like that.
The biggest message that I would give is sexual assault is real, rape is real, molestation is real. All of it is real. It's real, and maybe we don't encounter it every day, but I 100% know that you encounter people who have been raped and have been sexually assaulted on a daily basis. And so because of that, because you should have empathy, this is something that you should empathize with, even if you haven't experienced. I think it's time for us to really get a grasp on this. What is something that we can do to make sure that less people are being assaulted? What are some programs? Where's the resources to not just help when things happen, but to help before things happen, to educate people to get to a point where maybe it doesn't happen at all? That's my biggest thing. I just think that, like, as allies, as survivors, you know, it happened to us, but what are we doing with it? I think that's the biggest thing for me. Like, there's been a lot of bad things that's happened in my life, but if I don't put it to a use, then I'll sulk in it. So, like, my message is to y'all to let's get something started. Let's put some things in action and let's make some change. So people in the future don't have to go through the same experience as us.
I didn't really start healing until I did reach out for help. And being in that space of knowing something's very wrong, but being too afraid to do anything about it, is not where you want to be forever. Reaching out for support was the thing that allowed me to heal. And I know everyone's journey is different, but finding a licensed therapist who specializes in those things, knowing that it's confidential, and knowing that you have a safe space where you're not going to be judged, where you're not going to be belittled in any way, where you're just going to be treated with the utmost amount of respect and empathy. It really does help to know that you can reach out.
Support helps. That's the biggest thing. It doesn't feel like it's gonna help. It doesn't feel like useful or needed in this moment, especially if you just got assaulted or if you're dealing with past traumas. It doesn't feel like it's gonna help, but I promise you, once you start talking about it, once you start opening yourself up to the idea of even thinking about it, like for so long, I didn't even wanna think about it. I didn't wanna go certain places that would remind me of this person. Like, once you kind of open yourself up and really make up in your mind that you are not going to let their thoughts and what they did to you hold you back, the process becomes so much smoother. You're doing it for yourself. Take away all the external factors. Take it step by step, day by day. And I promise you, you'll, like, I was just telling my dad and my mom, I was like, I don't even recognize the Tabria from 2021. I don't want to say I don't know her because she still lives in me, but like the amount of growth that I have experienced within these couple years and the work that I put in, every tear, every sleepless night, every therapist session where I just want to scream, was all work to build you up, to become your present day self. And like, I'm not gonna say I'm 100% healed. Even doing this today is like a part of my healing process because I've never talked about it like this, but it's baby steps towards your progress. And I think you got this. If you are struggling, I know you got this.
I guess one thing I'd like to say to people who haven't been through it is to be there for people who have. Don't dismiss their stories. Don't try to guilt trip them to think it was their fault or make jokes about it, because it's a serious topic and it really has messed a lot of people up. So actually be supportive and listen to what the person has to say and actually try to understand. Like, don't just let them vent. Like, actually try to find common ground, actually try to walk in their shoes, in a sense, to empathize and sympathize with what they went through so that you can hopefully better help them.
I'm Kevin. I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim.
I am Krisha Caldwell, and I am a survivor of sexual assault and not a victim.
I am Noelle Owens. I am a survivor, not a victim.
My name is Tabria Snowden, and I am a survivor and not a victim.
My name is Eris Elliott Sperling, and I am a survivor, not a victim.
I am DeLauren Larry, and I am a survivor, not a victim.